so maybe he got tied up for a few minutes.
Oh, yeah, that can happen.
There he is.
Here I am.
There's our fearless leader.
Some days.
Hi, Brad.
Which part, fearless or leader?
I'll go with leader this morning. We'll see how fearless I am by the end of the class. Well, welcome everybody this morning. This will be our last installment, for now anyway, of this series. And thanks again to Sarah for putting together the study guide for us this morning and throughout the time. Really appreciate that. Let me make sure, yeah. So we'll get into it in a minute, but I'm not sure yet exactly what the next series is going to be. I have a few ideas knocking around in my head, but I'm anticipating that it'll probably be end of September, beginning of October, before I'm ready to get something started up again. But I'll let everybody know once I have a little bit clearer sense of that, and there'll also obviously be an announcement through the usual sources at the church, through the Monday message and other places. So that's the plan as it stands right now. So let's start with a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this time together, both this morning and throughout these many months. We've traveled some unusual ground in these last several months. Lord, we've had moments that were poignant and powerful, and some that were deeply sad. And the journey through these hymns has reflected that in so many ways. Thank you for the ways in which you have moved through these words, through our conversations, through our study. Thank you for the ways in which you guide our steps. You help us to edify each other, that you encourage and sustain us. I pray this morning that that what we do, what we say, what we learn would be pleasing in your sight. Use it all for your glory, Lord. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So does anybody remember where our journey with a glad obedience, does anybody remember where this journey started? Right, Walter Brueggemann put together this book reflecting on these various hymns. Does anybody remember the occasion? What was it that inspired him to do that?
The unveiling of the new hymnal.
Yeah, right. There was a new hymnal that was being unveiled, and they had asked Brueggemann to speak a little bit just about the why and the what of sacred music, and especially hymns, right? Why do we sing them? What is it that we sing? And so he sort of spent a little bit of time thinking about that, especially within the context of 4 psalms, right? There were 4 psalms that he lifted up and said, you know, these are good examples. These kind of capture why we sing and what we sing, right? Why we sing and what we sing. Does anybody remember what those 4 psalms are?
104. 107.
Yep.
105.
Yes.
106.
There we go. Right. Yeah. 104 through 107. That's it. It's not cheating if I told you you can have the book, right? So.
Not in my memory.
And what is it that we discover in these Psalms? There's a range that's covered in these Psalms, right? What is it? What's the range of themes? What's the range of ideas that's covered in these Psalms?
Praise and
I'm sorry?
thanksgiving. Praise and thanksgiving and lament.
Yeah, we've got praise, we've got thanksgiving, we've got lament. And who is it that we're praising? Or what is it that we're praising?
Creator.
Okay, the Creator, yeah. You know, in Psalm 104, we get this imagery of God as the Creator and the Provider. And the Psalm, of course, is sort of our way. The Psalms are our way of singing and praying the whole experience of creation, right? The whole experience of humankind. And these four Psalms in particular kind of cover that range very well. And yes, Psalm 104 talks about the creation and the way in which it's ordered, and ordered for our benefit, right? And why would we sing about that? I mean, why is that important? I mean, doesn't God already know what God's done? I mean, what are we going to add to it by singing about it?
Maybe
Remember,
it'll help us remember to take care of the place where we live.
Okay, yeah, part of it is to remember, right? To remember that this is sacred. This earth that we live in, it's not our own, right? We did not create it. We did not order it. And yet we have the benefit of it, right? We have a place within this creation, a special place within this creation. And this psalm lifts that up. But we give praise to the one who did create it. We give praise to the one whose creation it is. It's his, really. We need to remember that from time to time, don't we? Yeah, sure. What about what about Psalm 105? What is it that Psalm 105 has to say? Or what is it that we say in 105? I know, everybody was like, pop quiz. Nobody said anything about pop quiz today. It's hardly fair. Right, Psalm 105 remembers God's faithfulness to us. Remembers God's faithfulness to us, and in a particular context, in a particular story. Right, that we get ourselves into some trouble, and we need God's help to get out, and God is always faithful to us in that. And it tells that story. It tells the story of God's deliverance of his people. Yeah? Why do we need to remember that? Why would we be singing about that?
Because we're not as faithful.
Yeah, we're not too good at this faithfulness thing, right? But God is. And the other part of that, of course, is that when we cry out to God, and we all do and we all will, that's appropriate. It's okay. And God answers. God answers. And that is worth remembering. That is worth celebrating. Yes? We also have a need to make some confession, don't we? And Psalm 106 walks us through some of that, right? We need to confess the ways in which we have been unfaithful. We need to remember that As much as we like to sing with glad hearts, sometimes we need to sing with sad hearts, right? Hearts with repentance. Turning from what? Turning from sin, turning towards God. And we need to name those things. We're going to get into a little bit of that in today's hymn. And then, of course, Psalm 107, right? A special thanksgiving for deliverance from what? From many troubles. Right? From many troubles. So we sing in celebration, we sing in lament, we sing in thanksgiving, we sing praise to God for the whole of the human experience, right? And so each of the hymns each week that we've taken a look at has captured some of this, right? Okay. You guys. Okay, so yeah, each of the hymns that we've sung each week has sort of captured some of this. What are some of the hymns? I'd be curious to hear. What are some of the hymns that maybe you weren't familiar with before, or were only familiar with kind of in passing, that you've really appreciated these last several weeks? Have there been any sort of happy discoveries for you in the hymns that we have taken a look at?
Sing the Mighty Power of God, which is one that I wasn't that familiar with. But I find that there was a lot in there.
Mm-hmm. Which one are you thinking of, Randy?
I sing the mighty power of God.
I sing the mighty power of God. Sure, sure. Right? I'm turning to that one now in the book here. Isaac Watts, right? I sing the mighty power of God that made the mountains rise, that spread the flowing seas abroad and built the lofty skies. This, and what do we remember about this one? Who was this written, who was the target sort of audience for this one?
Children.
Right, this is a children's hymn. It starts off as a children's hymn. We sing this, and it's really powerful and everything, but this was really meant to be a little bit of a catechism for children. To sing this song and think about God, the Creator, right? And what all God has done, and to really sort of name that, right? Name the ways in which God is powerful and mighty.
Power, wisdom, and goodness. Power, wisdom, and goodness.
Power of wisdom and goodness. Sure. And this particular hymn comes from a particular time and context, the time when there is this growing sense of optimism. There's this growing sense of God's blessing on the empire, or what would become the empire, and specifically, there's this sense that there's finally enough food for everybody. There's enough wealth for everybody. There's enough progress for everybody. It's a very optimistic look at the power of God manifest in the lives of His people. Any others?
Holy, holy, holy.
Holy, holy, holy. Well, and tell me what it was about that one, Joan.
Well, we liked it enough that we had it in our wedding
Ah,
because it states who we believe in and the power of God.
sure.
That's a song that I sang in an assembly with all my student body at Latrobe High School. 1
Really?
day a week, we sang Holy, Holy, Holy. And I can't remember the other song. We had assembly on Wednesday and Friday. We had a chorus of 8 people led it, and there's an organ in the auditorium.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible was read, and we sang that song, and I can't remember the other one.
Okay.
They don't do that anymore.
Not so much.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is a very, this is a very powerful song again, sort of giving praise to God and naming, right? Naming who
Right.
God is. Again, pulling from some of the prophetic vision of God, both from Revelation, but also from Isaiah, right? Holy, holy, holy. There is none beside thee, perfect in power, in love, and purity. Perfect in power, in love, and purity, right? Those three qualities of God. Could have been just power, right?
Mhm.
Could have been just glory, but includes love and purity. Sure, powerful stuff. Any others?
The idea of a walk. There were two songs in his book, and there's still another one I know, Just a Closer Walk with Thee.
Yes.
So that concept goes back. Well, the first one's almost in the 1700s, and the second one in the 1800s. So it goes
Yes,
back a long way, I'm sure.
it
Probably before-
does. Right? Yes. This very strong sense. And it's interesting, this with that one in particular, oh, for a closer walk with God.
Mhm.
Right? In that hymn, it names both the longing to be closer to God and also names what else? That sense of distance from God, right? It says that second verse, where's the blessedness I knew when first I saw the Lord? Where's that soul refreshing view of Jesus and his word? Right? There's that sense, a lament, really. What peaceful hours I once enjoyed, how sweet their memory still. But they have left an aching void the world can never fill. Right? There's a very personal longing here. Very poignant. We long for this
After
closer
the
walk.
mountaintop experience, you have to come down into the valley again.
There you go. Yes.
That reminded me of there.
Yeah, we have those times when we are very much in the valley. Very much in the valley. And we name that. Right? We name that. We can even sing that together. And there's this renunciation within this song, right? There's an acknowledgement that that I have followed other idols, right? I have walked away. I have walked away in some way. And so the dearest idol I have ever known, this is the renunciation part. Whatever that idol be, help me to tear it from thy throne and worship only thee, right? This sense again of repentance, coming back to God. Any others before we dive in?
I have a question, Brad. Are all these hymns in the new hymnal that came out that he was writing about?
I don't know off the top of my head, Jack. That's a good question. It's a really good question. I
I've
don't
not seen
think
the new
so.
hymnal.
I
My
don't.
guess would be no.
Yeah, I don't think so. And today's example would be why, because I don't think this once to every man and nation actually appears in the new hymnal. I think he even says something to that effect. Um, so yeah, I don't think so.
He didn't even mean it to be a hymn, did he? He didn't even mean it to be a hymn when he wrote it. It was a poem, was it not?
I think so. I think you're right about that. Let's take a look at this one today. So context. So what is the what's the context for this one today? What was going on
The
that
Mexican War.
inspired this?
Mexican War.
Yeah, right. And so for those who may be a little rusty on their U.S. history, right? The Mexican War. What were some of the factors leading up to the Mexican War? What was some of the history of the time?
1836, what's his name? Santa Anna turned over Texas to the U.S. And then
Okay.
for 10 years they were on their own because they weren't a state and they were like a territory. And in that time, James K. Polk, the president, wants to have it all annexed, so he sends Winfield Scott and the troops down to Mexico City and takes over. And they have the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which gives us everything north of the Rio Grande. And the Wilmot Proviso was the other thing going on at the time. And it was all done because they wanted to make sure that Texas was a slave state so they wouldn't ruin the imbalance between the South and the North.
Right. We have huge political factors going on at the time between the northern states and the southern states. You have a real interest to maintain some sort of balance there between two major political forces. And by expanding in the South, areas where a slave economy would grow or have space to grow, you shift the balance of power, right? You shift the balance of power, and you know, we have this idea of manifest destiny that's coming about during this time, right? That the idea that the Lord has sort of ordained the United States to take a greater and greater role, leadership role, and to spread its government, to spread its leadership all around it, neighboring countries, neighboring territories. And this poem takes issue with some of that, right? This poem takes issue with some of that.
James Russell Lowell was an abolitionist.
Correct.
And that was part of his, but you know, he fluctuated back and forth. The older he got, they weren't sure where he was. Maybe he wasn't sure either.
Could be. Could be. Let's take a look at, the text itself, right? We'll take a look at the text itself. Actually, are folks familiar with this hymn? Do you know what this hymn sounds like? I have a feeling.
I do.
Okay. I have a feeling most of us would recognize it once we actually catch the tune, but just off the top of our heads, I think it's not sung in church. I'm gonna share a version of it with you. Let's see here.
Good.
All right. You'd think I'd be faster at this by now. Okay, here we go. Okay. So, so, so Jack, when you all sang every week at Latrobe, it sounded something like that.
No,
No, the student assemblies didn't sound like that.
not to me. I'm not a good musician. If they're the same, it didn't sound the same to me.
Well, did you notice something about their version of this?
Weren't the same words as are in the book.
Yeah, so they skipped a verse. They skipped the second verse.
Mhm.
They went from verse 1 to verse 3 and then 4. And then in verse 4, they took the liberty of coming back around and naming that last sort of stanza there. So let's get into this a little bit. So once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide. And what is it that what is it that we have to decide? Each individual and each nation, what is it that we have to decide? We have to decide whether we're going to be on the side of good or on the side of evil. In the strife of truth with falsehood, in the strife with truth with falsehood, for the good or the evil side. We all have a choice, a series of choices, really, right? There are these moments that come when we have to make a choice. We have to make a choice. And even not making a choice is a choice, right?
Mhm.
He's putting it to us. He's saying, there is no staying on the sidelines with this. We all have a responsibility here.
Choice was whether to go to war, why we went to war or not, and why we did it. That was the problem Lowell had, is why we had no business. He's saying we had no business being there.
Right, exactly so, right? He's saying that these moments come where we have a responsibility. And in this case, he's talking about a war. He's talking about a war that he views as unjust, basically, that's politically motivated. And he would argue that the true sort of reasons for this war were not being broadcast, right? That falsehood.
Is that any different than most wars?
Ah, good point, Randy, right? Good point. How many wars, how many basically conflicts, how many conflicts have been waged with a narrative that is not altogether accurate, right? To justify,
Like right now in our politics.
right? Yes. Some great cause, God's new Messiah, offering each the bloom or blight, and the choice goes by forever twixt that darkness and that light.
You know, the thing with Lowell, who is different, Brad, is that he really doesn't talk about being a Christian, or he really doesn't even show any religious leanings whatsoever. Not through his whole life. You know, his father was a Unitarian minister, but that's as far as he went.
Yeah.
He was even in trouble. He was a bad boy when he was at Harvard.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So he really doesn't. I'm not sure where he is with all that.
Yeah, I mean, so we're hearing from people sometimes that have led exemplary lives. I think we would take a look at the author from last week,
Yes.
and we would say, you know, that's an example of a saint within the faith,
Right.
someone who really really lived out the gospel effectively. And then other times we're hearing from folks that we would say, "Wow, I'm not sure that that's a life I want to aspire to or emulate." And at the same time, what? They may still speak truth to us, right? They may still speak truth to us because, what he's putting forth here, once to every person and nation comes the moment to decide. Well, there certainly are moments like that, aren't there? What was it? Friday. What happened in Washington on Friday? "50 years after the original."
John Washington.
March on Washington, right? The March on Washington. And what was the March on Washington all about?
The original or the latest one? Or
The
both?
original. The original.
Racism.
Civil rights.
Mhm.
Right, civil rights, right? And the civil rights movement. And what is that basic, what is that basic choice, right? What's that basic choice that's before us? What was that basic choice that was being lifted up? That all people have worth, that all people should have equal access to the rights, the liberties that we as a nation espouse.
And we don't practice that all
And
people are
justice.
created equal in God's image. We don't practice it.
Okay.
Right.
Brueggemann, he takes a lot of freedom this time in his discussion. Okay, he becomes more political in this discussion than any of the others.
Sure.
And he makes some comments that he can't really back up. A good example is, at one point he says, after the Mexican War, everyone knew that slavery was now unsustainable. Everyone knew that this ancient good was to come to an end. I don't think anybody south of the Mason-Dixon line knew it. And where's everyone? Who's everyone then?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a few schools of thought about that. Some would say, that wasn't sort of common understanding. Others would say, others have argued that it is, right?
Sure.
Wherever we land on that one, what is it that this, so Brueggemann has a perspective on that. He has an idea about that. What is it that this hymn is sort of calling us to do, though? Right? The verse 2 is really saying there's a choice to be made. Then to side with truth is noble.
Right.
To side with truth is noble. But what? It's also realistic about what that may look like.
Even though he talks of being an activist, he was a pacifist himself. So he's proponing this, but this isn't really where he is, because he didn't get actively involved in anything to do with a lot of this.
Sure.
He wrote it.
Yeah, he wrote about it, right? Talked about it a good bit. But what does it look like, for instance, then to side with the truth is noble when we share her wretched crust? When we share her wretched crust. What does it look like to share the wretched crust?
But you look at all the bad things that were going on at the same time, that's the bad part. When the side where truth is noble, but yet we've gone through all these bad things at the same time.
Yeah, you can be on the side of truth and still suffer. You can be on the side of truth and still not be in power or the majority, right?
Right.
If you take a look at those lunch counter sit-ins,
Mhm.
would we argue that they were on the right side of history. Sure, but was it wretched at the time?
Yes.
Sure. Just ask
Sure.
John Lewis.
It was wretched, but we didn't want to look at it.
We did not. Right? It took a while for folks, and you know,
Still going on.
yeah, I was going to say we can't say that we're fully there yet, right?
Right.
If we were, we wouldn't be having a march on Friday. We wouldn't have a lot of the upheaval that we have. We're not there yet. Then it is the brave man that chooses, while the coward stands aside. Till the multitude make virtue of the faith they had denied, right? This is, again, this is where the brave person, he's saying, this is where the brave person chooses while the coward stands aside. And have we ever been there? I suspect that all of us, at one point or another, have occupied the place of the coward. Sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly. Where we know what is right, but we are afraid to stand up for it. Verse 3 gives us some hope, though, doesn't it? By the light of burning martyrs. Now, what is he pulling from historically for that?
I think the Roman persecution, like Nero burned Christians.
That's right. Yeah. Used them as torches for his garden. Right? Terrible, terrible times of persecution that he is drawing our attention to, helping us to remember. And then he goes straight to it, right? Straight to the example of Jesus. Christ, your bleeding feet we track, toiling up new Calvaries, ever with the cross that turns not back, right? New occasions teach new duties. Time makes ancient good uncouth. Right? We really have this sense of, right? Taking up the cross is going to involve suffering. Taking up the cross is going to involve rejection. What? But that's what the decision requires. That's what the decision requires. But what happens? What happens over time? What does it mean when he says time makes ancient good uncouth?
Takes a very, like he's talking about with the ancient good, it takes a very long time sometimes to work some of these things out.
Absolutely.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Does not. But eventually,
Slavery was seen as a good thing for many, many, many years.
yes. Yes,
Or it was
right?
decided that wasn't a good thing.
Right? People of all sorts of different cultures, right? People of all sorts of different cultures were seen as less than human, less than fully human. And so it's okay to treat them as less than fully human. Right?
Right.
We don't have to go very far back to see that within our history. People of various culture. Even the whole, I'm not going to go too far on this, but even the whole idea of race. Even the whole idea of race.
Well, it's happening right now with the immigration struggle, as well as Black Lives Matter. Anybody that's different is seen as not valuable.
And so what are we struggling towards? We're struggling towards a time where we will no longer accept, where we will no longer have things that are not good, right? Things that are sinful, acceptable, right? That's what we're struggling towards. Time makes ancient good uncouth, no longer acceptable, no longer appearing good. They must upward still and onward. Who would keep abreast of truth, right? Who would keep abreast of truth? These changes, we have to all be ready. We have to all be willing to see, willing to be more open-minded and to see the places where we need to change, where what we have accepted as right might be wrong. And again, you know, if we take a look at civil rights, right? If we take a look at civil rights, we had
A lot more
willing.
civil wrongs than rights, I think, Brad.
There you go. There you go. And in many ways, I think what's fair to say is that there are still ways in which we are not aware of, and perhaps even willfully blind to, our complicity.
Has the church right now been on the cowardly side?
Well,
And I mean that just not just the big denominations, but all the churches.
yeah. I mean, I think I think
A lot of cowards.
we've got room. We've got room to improve, don't we?
Right.
It's always interesting how the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. Because we have civil rights and we have immigration, but our Native Americans, they're the ones that are always pushed aside.
You're right.
We give them less. We talk about less about what we can do for them, and yet they were the ones that were here. This was their country, and yet we treat them. They're way down the ladder when it comes to getting anything.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
That's where the real wrong starts.
We've got a lot of work to do to both open our eyes to see, right? To see the ways in which we participate in these ancient goods that are not good, right? We have our own responsibility to keep abreast of the truth. But though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis truth alone is strong. And this is that optimism that I was talking about. He's basically saying, yeah, but what is ultimately the strongest is the truth, and that all of these other evil causes will eventually fail. Right? Truth prevails, evil fails. But though her portion be the scaffold, truth's portion be the scaffold, and upon the throne be wrong, yet that scaffold sways the future. And behind the dim unknown stands our God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. Yet that scaffold sways the future. I mean, it's a haunting image, isn't it? Right? Truth is on the scaffold. It looks like truth has lost. What's he throwing our eyes back to?
Praise crucifixion.
Right? Yes, the crucifixion. It looks like truth has been killed. But what? That scaffold sways the future. Don't lose sight of that. And behind that dim unknown stands our God, even within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. Again, it's a haunting image. It's a haunting image, but that promises a redemption, right? But we have work to do. We have work to do. We have a voice to lift up. I mean, I think as I was working my way through this one today, all I could hear was King's last sermon. Right? King's last sermon, where he's saying, you know, I may not get there with you. I may not get there with you. I mean, I think he has a sense that he's up on the scaffold as well. But what? But I'm not afraid. And the truth shall prevail. If you haven't listened to that one in a while, today'd be a good day. Today'd be a good day. And then come back to this hymn and give it another read or another listen. Well, gang, I don't want to keep us into church, so we're going to go ahead and bid farewell for now. Does everybody know just one quick thing? Does everybody know the origins of the word goodbye? I did not know this one until recently. Goodbye is just a shortened version of God be with you. God be with you. So, as I sign off for this week, until we see each other again, God be with you.
Vaya con Dios.
Thank you, Senor.
Hey, enjoy the month off.
Thank you. Bye, gang.
Forward to the next lesson.
Me too.